are listening to the Thornapple Valley Church podcast. Thank you for joining us. Our hope is for you to be encouraged and to connect with God during this message. If you'd like to know more about Thornapple Valley Church, visit tvcweb.com.
Now, I know what you might be thinking in Delton, Middleville, also here at the Hastings campus. When you saw that video, you might be wondering to yourself, Keith, why are you wearing an orange traffic vest while you're working in your shed at your house? And the answer is, you never know when you're going to cross the street. Safety first. So that's why I'm wearing my traffic vest. But all joking aside, I just love what God's doing here at our church. I was just thinking and did a little research, is that in the last year, so from April to April, we have seen 230 people get baptized and put their faith in Jesus. Isn't that exciting? Man, I just love being a part of a church where life change is happening, where it's okay to not be okay, but a place where you can get okay in time. And so I just love what God's doing around here. But here's what I know, is that what a lot of us don't love, what a lot of us don't like, is walking through, dealing with, addressing our mental health issues and challenges. But the truth is, we all have them. It's just like physical challenges. We all have physical challenges from time to time. And to have a physical challenge doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It just means that you're normal. To have a mental health issue or even a crisis just makes you human. We talked about that in week one, and we talked about how we all have to wrestle through different kinds of issues. I talked about in my own life, wrestling through anxiety. Today we're going to talk about what do you do, not with just personal anxiety, but what do you do when you feel anxiety related to a situation around you? If you got a Bible or a Bible app, I'm going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 19. In 2 Samuel chapter 19, we're going to see the king, the famous king, David. David is in a place in his life where he's in a really dark spot in his life. He's in such a dark spot to the point where his own son has overthrown him as king. Now, most of us have been through betrayal or disappointment, maybe in a business relationship. There was a partner, there was somebody that you started the business with, and they were the brains, you were the visionary, and all of a sudden they betrayed you. Took half the business and moved to Florida or Vegas or whatever. But what do you do when it's not just a friend? It's not somebody that you just grew up with, but this is your own flesh and blood. David's dealing with anxiety on multiple levels. First, he's dealing with the anxiety that he's not king anymore, and he's got to wrestle within his own heart and his own soul with the rejection from a nation who at one point they held him king, and now the nation has turned against him. And then he has to deal with the rejection from his own son, the feelings of sadness and failure. He's wrestling through all of that. Well, he's going to make a decision along with his commanders. The nation is in civil war. He's going to go to battle with his own son. You got to imagine being a commander. Every day as he's sitting there at the battle lines, and he's won multiple battles, he's been incredibly victorious, but every time he's sitting down with the strategy and the generals and the joint chiefs of staff, he's weeping because he's wondering, is it worth it? And this is my son. Well, they go to battle and they win the battle, but then he gets some incredibly bad news. I want you to think right now, how do you respond when you get bad news? Because we all get bad news. For me, I got to a point where, a few years ago, where I stopped watching the news for the most part altogether. Now I watch it from time to time, and there's a few shows I tune into, but the news, bad news can be overwhelming. But for David, this is not just public bad news, it's personal bad news. I want you to see how he responds to this bad news he gets in 2 Samuel chapter 19. And I'm going to start right there in verse 1. It says, Joab was told, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. Now in Hebrew culture, these were two different things. There's weeping That is the emotional response. And then there's mourning, which is the physical sign of what's going on in somebody's soul. See, in that day, if you were in mourning, it would have meant that you would have been wearing something called sackcloth, which was a dark cloth that was actually kind of painful. And he would have had ashes on his head. And every time you saw David, this once great general, this once guy who had boldness and confidence, you would have saw him walking around with ashes on his head, distraught, disappointed. Can't hardly have a conversation with you without breaking down. He is in a moment of incredible sadness. Here's what happens next in verse 2. For the whole army, the victory that day was turned into mourning, because that day the troops heard it said, the king is grieving for his son. This is the one battle David wanted to win, but it still felt like a loss. We've all had those moments in our lives where we won the court proceeding, but we lost a friend. We lost a colleague. And we had to go to court because it felt like it was the right thing to do. But how do you feel when you win, but you still lose? That's what David is feeling. And what he's feeling is actually transferred to everybody who's in the army. Let's keep going. Verse 3. The men stole into the city that day as men still in who are ashamed when they flee from battle. You got to imagine this. These are guys who won. I mean, the strategy worked. What they set out, the plans and then traps that they set, it worked. But yet you see these guys and they're not high-fiving each other. They walk in with their heads down, sad and disappointed. He goes on to say this in verse 4. The king covered his face. That's what I'm talking about in mourning. Covered his face and cried aloud, "Oh, my son Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." What a moment. Now, how do you deal with this? It was the one win that didn't feel like a win. Well, Joab, the commander of the king's army, here's how he's going to respond in verse 5. It says, then Joab went into the house to the king and said, today you have humiliated all your men who have saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines. Get over it, David. Yeah, you lost one son, but you got other sons and you got other wives and you got other stuff. Let's get on with this. And then he goes on to say this in verse 6. You love those who hate you and you hate those who love you. You've made it clear today that the commanders and their men mean nothing to you. I see that you would be pleased if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead. Now, go out and encourage your men. I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not a man will be left by nightfall. And this will be worse for you than all the calamities that have come on you from your youth till now. Man, this is a story. It starts off sounding like a great story. They won. But when you read it, it's an incredibly sad story. You know, as I read this, the first thing that I notice, if you're taking notes, I want you to write down this statement, is anxiety and grief is transferable. It's transferable. See, when they win the battle, they feel good, they feel confident, they feel excited. But when they see David in mourning and in grief, what he's feeling transfers to them. Now, every one of us in this room, everybody watching me in Delton, in Middleville, and online, knows what it's like to experience the mood of a room that it gets transferred to you. And as a pastor, I've had this happen to me hundreds of times. I've walked into happy rooms where people are so excited. Somebody just had a baby, and maybe people are grinning from ear to ear. And have anybody ever seen somebody and they hand you an ugly baby and they're so happy about that baby? You know what I'm talking about. I know you're judging me, but you felt that, right? They handed it to you. Like, isn't he beautiful? And you go, I mean, he's healthy. But anyway, here's the point. The emotion of the moment, what's happening in the room, gets transferred to you. But as a pastor, I've also walked into those moments where the lights are off and it's sad. And literally, I can feel it as soon as I walk in the door, as soon as I step across the threshold, the sadness, the grief, the loss. And sometimes I know the person, but I don't know the situation, but I can feel what they're feeling because the mood of the room gets transferred to me. Grief and anxiety is transferable. They're feeling this moment and they're dealing with this moment. And there's some options of how do you process an anxiety-filled situation. Let me talk to every parent who's listening to me right now. You've had this more than once happen to you recently. There's something going on with your kid. And it really doesn't matter what's going on in your business. You could have just got a promotion. You just could have got a raise. And people don't know why you're so sad. And it's not because what happened was not good. It's because emotionally you feel the weight of what happened and what's going on with somebody near you. See, anytime you and I find ourselves in anxiety-filled situations, we have really one of three options of how we're going to respond to it. And most of us have chosen one of these multiple times in our life. Here's the very first option we have is something called enmeshment. Enmeshment. This is when something happens to somebody that I'm close to, and emotionally I get all wrapped up in it. The emotion that they have gets transferred to me, and I'm feeling it just like they feel it. In week one, or actually I think it was week two, I talked to you about that moment in my own life when I experienced a lot of anxiety several years ago. And the interesting thing about it, it had nothing to do with what was going on in my own personal life. I was doing fine physically in every way. I had some, I had to get some things in my life under control, but I'm talking about I had no physical issues according to the doctor, but emotionally I was so enmeshed with all the people I were close to that what they were feeling, I was feeling it. And many of us have felt this, and we don't know what to do when we find ourselves enmeshed in somebody else's issue. If you want to define enmeshment, here's how you define it. It's when your well-being is so deeply connected to another's well-being to the point where if they're not happy, you don't feel safe or happy either. What they feel, I feel. And I feel it so much that I can't even actually help them. I can't help them get better because I feel it. I'm so overwhelmed by it. It's so deep. That's what's going on for the men. They're so enmeshed in the situation, enmeshed in what's going on. They knew that Absalom was a problem child. But yet at the same time, what David's feeling in that moment, the depth of his grief. David, who's a general, who's a warrior. David, who's a guy who's fought and won so many battles. And David is the guy who's confident. And they always see David bold and confident and ready. In this moment, David is a basket case. And those men, many of them who fought alongside David, who've had those victories, they're so close with him that they feel that deeply. Something that often comes out of enmeshment is codependency. Is that I get so wrapped up in what's going on in your life that I start neglecting what's going on in my own life. And what you're feeling, I start to feel it so deeply that I ignore my own life and my own family. People who are empathic, who have a natural sense to just feel and connect, this is something you deal with a lot. I used to teach at a Bible college down south, and all of our staff at the Bible college would mentor students, and one of the students I had the gift of mercy. And I'll never forget talking to this young lady, and she said that there will be times where people close to me will be going through pain, and literally it will have nothing to do with what I'm actually going through, but I will feel their pain to the point where I can't even go to school because I feel it so deeply. Well, there's a spiritual gift called the gift of mercy, and people who have the gift of mercy are amazing because they can actually feel what's going on inside of you, and they can bring comfort and encouragement to you. But yet at the same time, any of us who've ever felt that know that, man, getting enmeshed can be overwhelming. And if you got one friend, it's one thing. If you got 100 friends who've got 100 different issues that's overwhelming, man, you've had a bad year. But here's the second reality. Here's the second choice that we all have, and you see it in Joab's life and his response. So we have the opportunity to be enmeshed, but we also have the second choice is detachment. Detachment. So Joab, he's an army general. He's become hardened, and he sees David mourning, and he walks in and he sees David, and he's just crying, and he's like ugly crying. And David and Joab walks in and he says, "Hey, David, how long are you going to do this? Like, toughen up, Buttercup. Listen, it's a battle. He overthrew you. You didn't make him overthrow you. And in a battle, in a war, somebody wins, somebody loses. So you need to get up and get after it. And you just got to imagine being David. You can't find a tougher man than David, and yet he's dealing with a general who has no sense of compassion. You know, what Joab is going to define to us is what detachment looks like. And all of us have felt people and met people and dealt with people who are detached. Here's some of the characteristics of detachment is people who are detached are always harsh with their words. They're harsh. See, people who are detached, they think this: the only kind of love somebody needs is tough love. But the truth of the matter is when we walk through painful moments, at some point we might need tough love, but what we need in the moment is compassionate love. When something takes me off guard and I didn't know it was coming, even if I knew it was coming, but it's just one of those life-shattering moments, what I need is a hug, not a coach to kick me when I'm down. And honestly, this is what breaks my heart about church. I love our church, but there's a lot of churches when people are down. I'm talking about they've messed up. They've had an affair. They've made bad decisions in their choices with their finances, and they show up at a church looking for grace and compassion. Not justification, not to say that it's okay, but they just need somebody to pick them up. There's a lot of people who just kick people when they're down. And it makes me think, it makes me wonder, have they so detached to when they are down that they don't realize what they needed in that moment? Because I got to tell you, somebody who grew up in church and knew when to stand up and when to sit down, I'll never forget going to church and experiencing love and unconditional grace. And I remember being in that place, and here's what I felt: safe. To be real. To be honest. To grow. To change. And I honestly think with all the stuff going on in the world, we need churches where it's okay to experience God's grace for change. Can you guys say amen up in here? See, in this moment, Joab comes and he just is harsh with his words, and then he does the next thing that oftentimes happens with detached people is they misjudge the motives of other people. They misjudge David's motives. He says, "Listen, David, you would have been happy if Absalom would have lived, and we, the people who actually love you, who are actually concerned about you, would have died." No way. No way. David's just emotional. See, when I'm emotional and when you're emotional, we don't make sense. That's what being emotional is all about. We go through these ups and downs and we say things we don't mean. We feel things. And honestly, in the midst of those moments, here's what oftentimes we need is somebody to just listen without judging. To just listen and care. And oftentimes we say things that don't make sense. I remember several years ago walking through a major disappointment. Life is full of disappointment, but there's some major disappointments that will rock your world. I had one of those. I'll never forget a friend called me and said, "Hey, I'm here to talk if you want to talk." And honestly, in that moment, I wanted to talk, but I didn't want to talk. So for an hour, we walked around, and I said a bunch of stuff. Stuff that I hope he was not recording, because some of it made sense, most of it didn't make sense, but here's what I felt after that moment. I felt freedom. Because I'm working through all of these things, and somebody just came alongside to listen. Let me set some of you free. You got people in your life who are hurting, and honestly, what they don't need you to do is tell them what's the right thing to do, not in that moment. Eventually they do. But here's what they need you to do is just listen and say, "Tell me more." Why do you feel that way? You don't know? Okay. What do you need from me? That's what gets a person through that. But then here's the last thing about people who are detached is they're unreasonably impatient. Did you know what he's going to say in verse 7? If you don't get up and go out there and encourage these people, you're not going to have anybody by nightfall. You got to get up and do something about this right now. Here's what I've learned about judgment. There is a time for judgment, but oftentimes it's not in the moment. It's not in the moment. In the moment, what people need is love, care, and grace. And then over time, time will tell if a person, that love needs to transition into tough love. But right in that moment, what they need is somebody to be patient. And this is what the spiritual journey is all about. Because I don't know about you, but I remember when I started following Jesus, man, I had so much excitement. And, you know, I got serious with God in the 90s. Anybody who was around in the 90s? Okay. Some of you teenagers are like, "I don't know, Mom, was I around in the 90s?" Like, no, we're still working on you in the 90s. But here's the thing. In the 90s, I remember, man, we'd sing these songs and I'd be so motivated. And then I could also remember times messing up along the way. But it was kind of like this. And then eventually starting to get it. And then like this, starting to get it. See, we all need people who are patient. But when we're detached, what happens is detachment comes from either I am so long away from the pain in my own life that I no longer feel, or I just can't relate, and because I can't relate, I assume that your experience is just like mine. And that's just not how it works. So I'm impatient. I'm frustrated all the time. And that's Joab. But here's the final choice that we have. And the last one that we have is a term called differentiation. Differentiation. So I'm in an anxiety-filled situation, so I can get enmeshed and get emotional and get in there, and in the midst of that emotional moment, I can carry all the emotion of that moment. I can detach, say, "Everybody shut up, I got this, it's all good." Or what I can do is I can connect while also not being overwhelmed. See, I want to show you a moment in David's life, and this is probably 30, 40 years earlier, where David steps into an anxiety-filled situation. I want you to look at this with me. Go back to 1 Samuel chapter 17. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, there's another battle. There's a guy by the name of Goliath. He's 9 feet tall. He's got a spear, and the spear, just the tip of it, weighs 125 pounds. This guy's serious business. And he is bold, he's brash, he's irreverent, he's talking smack every day. He gets up and he talks smack. He says to the nation of Israel, he says, "I'm going to step on you the way Draymond Green stepped on Sabonis." Man, it is going down. Was that too soon? Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. Anyway, here's the point. He's talking trash every day. The king is worried, he's nervous, he's afraid. He's looking for somebody to go up in battle against this warrior. So David raises his hand. Here's what happens in verse 38, chapter 17. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic, put his coat of armor on him, a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened his sword over his tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. And then here's David's response. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So what did he do? All right, some of you went to sleep because you didn't have your Starbucks. What did he do? He took them off. So Saul's anxious. So he takes his anxiety and he puts it on David. All right, well, put this on you. Let's go, man. God bless you. You can do it. I think you can. Go for it. And David puts it all on, tries it. David says, nah. This is real. I'm not going to act like this is not real, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this in a way that makes sense for me. So here's what he's going to do in verse 40. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his shepherd's bag with his sling in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. Here's what I love about David. Here's how I know David could have been from Berry County. Because Saul says, go get you a sword. He says, all I need is a couple rocks from Podunk Lake, and he is going down. It's going to happen. I'm good. Man, put that down. From Berry County, I can do this. David says, listen, I'm not minimizing the situation. I'm just going to differentiate myself. Because my assumption is that if I have faith in God and I use the training and experience that I have, that it's going to make the situation better. Here's how you define differentiation. It's being fully yourself while still being deeply connected to others. See, in enmeshment, I lose myself in the emotion of the moment. In detachment, I totally disconnect myself. In differentiation, I am still me, but I connect in a way that I can help. Let me explain it like this. I've got a couple volunteers. Will you guys give it up for Jessica and Larry Phillips? They're here somewhere. Now, Jessica and Larry, I'm going to tie you guys up with this rope. And before service, I said, hey, do you mind if I tie you guys up with the rope? And they said, hey, Pastor, I didn't realize that I was in for that at church. Why don't you step up a little bit further here? But Jessica and Larry Phillips are married. So, all right, I'm going to have you tie yourself up. Just wrap that around yourself. No, wrap it around yourself. Yep. And then Larry, and then you can just face the audience. And then Larry, do the same thing. I want you to wrap this around yourself. All right, there you go. All right, give me that side there. All right, you guys can face the audience. This is what I would describe as enmeshment. With people that we know, that we love, when they feel something, when we're enmeshed, we feel it at the same level. So I want you to go that way, Jessica. Larry, I want you to go with her. Everything she feels, everything she experiences, you're experiencing. All right, come this way. Whatever it is, you feel it. Now, there's another way to respond. This almost happens naturally for us, is Larry, I want you to just disconnect your rope completely. Disconnect it. This is detachment, where Jessica's feeling something and Larry just doesn't feel anything at all. He's just like, well, I don't know. I mean, get over it. I mean, we're going to be fine. I don't care. I'm good. This is detachment. All right, now I want you to drop the rope completely. I'm going to bring this right here, and then I'm going to bring this right here. And I want each of you guys to sit in one of these seats. This is differentiation. They're in the same car, but different seats. It's kind of like when you're on a plane, they say, first put on your own mask before you help the other person with their mask. Differentiate yourself. Take care of yourself so you can actually connect with the other person. You're experiencing the same thing, but you're experiencing it differently. And as you're experiencing differently, the difference of how you handle this is actually what's going to actually be a blessing and a help to her, because feeling it is one thing, but you doing something different to actually help her is actually what makes a difference. Will you guys give it up for my friends Jessica and Larry? Thank you, guys. You know, as I close, I just want to say, if you're dealing with anxiety, either personally or relationally, it's real. And for some of us, we feel so entangled with it, we don't know how to get out of it. Let me just give you a couple practical steps. Here's the very first step to start processing how to differentiate yourself in a situation, is ask yourself this question: where do I end and the other person begins? Where do I end? Think about it for a second. Okay, there's this problem. I'm so wrapped up in it. Okay, what part of it is a problem that's not part of me, and then what part is their problem? Then here's another question that you should ask yourself is, what is mine to carry? If you got a kid, a grandkid who's dealing with something, what's mine to carry in this? And then here's the next question, what is theirs to carry? Like, what part is their responsibility that I'm not even supposed to be messed up and worried about that? It's not that I don't love them. I'm just trying to figure out, how do I stay differentiated enough to help? And then here's the last question is, what's God's to carry? What's something neither one of us can do anything about, but if we trust God, He can do something about it, and that's going to bring peace to the situation. See, if we want to be healthy in our mental health, we've got to deal with the anxiety both personally and relationally. And with that, let me pray for you. God, today I pray for my church family, for those of us who are dealing with anxiety-filled situation in our work, in our neighborhood, and we really don't know how to process it. God, I pray you would give us hope and you would give us peace. In Jesus' name. And everyone said, Amen.
Thank you for listening to the Thornapple Valley Church podcast. If you found this message encouraging, we invite you to share it. For more information, visit tbcweb.com.